Professor Chitra Narayan has extensive years of practice, and she is a Chevening Scholar at the University of Warwick. She has spent about 2 decades practicing law in the Madras High Court, working in multiple firms, including Jyoti Sagar Associates, where she was a partner in Chennai. And her range of practice is mostly in corporate commercial law, but she's also done a lot of pro bono work. She has also, as a transactional lawyer, advised on corporate and shareholder disputes, public interest disputes, commercial disputes, mergers, acquisitions, joint ventures and investment agreements, general commercial agreements, and of course, as I mentioned, matrimonial disputes. Professor Chitra Narayan has also published extensively, and she's currently working on a book on mediation and how it applies in various settings, ranging from family law disputes to intellectual property disputes and so on and so forth. Assisting her in building this track is a familiar face, someone who's already taught you and who's going to teach you this main term, Professor Mahesh Menon. So the two of them have really remodeled a lot of the initial track that you may find presence in the fellow handbook and the website and so on. And then today it's really quite different from what I had initially sort of put together with my limited understanding. And I must say that it is probably the most exciting track in terms of design at the fellowship as things stand. So over to you, Chitra and Mahesh, to speak to our fellows more about the track.
Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to just share a short presentation, PowerPoint, but it's don't bother writing anything there. It's just guidance for the conversation to move. Yeah, so I want to start with a number. A question was asked in Parliament of the government on the number of cases that are pending in this last session of Parliament. And as of a couple of weeks ago, we have 4 crore cases pending from the Supreme Court to the lowest court. And we're not talking about tribunals. We're not talking about special courts. I mean, these are just, your regular civil and criminal courts, starting from the Taluk district level up to the Supreme Court. Another interesting number is that as of February 2020, there were 3.65 crores. So in a matter of few months, we've added 35 lakh cases that are pending in court. So when you look at, what one needs to sort of understand and learn and sort of think about in the disputes track and in disputes resolution, this number and this pendency as a problem and as an issue sort of burdens everyone. And keeping this in mind and keeping some level of aspiration, Mahesh and I have worked on this track with a lot of hope, because you are the lawyers of the future, and this is not a great legacy we are leaving, but we are sharing with you. But this is there, and this is your responsibility very, very soon. So let me first talk about what we hope to sort of do in the disputes track. The first is, of course, the issues in disputes resolution, one of which that I mentioned. There are a few more that I'll come to in a little while. The second is categories of disputes and processes. So we will have, and there will be a lot of practitioner support, so that you get a sense of what happens really in these disputes. So there are a lot of expert practitioners in various areas who will take you through civil, commercial, insolvency, international disputes, labor, matrimonial disputes, so that you have an idea of the entire range of dispute categories that we have, broad categories that we have, and how things are done there. Mahesh will be leading discussions on the constitutional remedies public law and lawyering, very important, because often you see that problems in other dispute sectors go to the High Court and the Supreme Court, claiming a constitutional right or a remedy. The next is the diversity in disputes resolution. We want to approach our understanding and our learning of the disputes resolution landscape not as a monolith and as courts and tribunals, but also to look at several ways in which people have sort of innovated to resolve disputes, and top-down innovations as well from the government, from the courts, on how disputes can be resolved. So there's a range and a diversity in processes. Again, I'll come to it in a little bit. We also want to redefine what the core of disputes resolution is, and Anant just referred to it now. It isn't, there is a conflict, but adversariality or an adversarial system is not the only way to resolve disputes. You have mediation, you have conciliation, and you have hybrid systems built on this that help you resolve disputes in a more collaborative way, where we look at a problem as your problem and my problem, it is our problem, let us see how we resolve it. So disputes doesn't mean you immediately shoot off a notice, making a bunch of allegations, get something in response, and then take that forward. The other aspect that we want to also focus on in our objectives in the disputes track is the elements of autonomy in dispute resolution, which is there in arbitration and in mediation. The last is the human elements in disputes, where we will be bringing into play certain attributes of the person, the individual for whom this entire infrastructure, these rules and these processes have been made. And we hope to touch upon judges and decision making. We hope to touch upon the role of psychology, the impact of conflict on persons, the impact of conflict processes on persons. How are we dealing with our children when they are caught in a dispute? These are elements that we hope to look at in this. Now, we want to look at the disputes track through these four sort of aspects, which will run vertically and horizontally in the various topics or courses that we have in the track. The first is the problem. And I spoke about pendency of cases. We have a problem of access to courts. So giving an example, you have tribunals that have been set up as a response to, pendency of cases or delay in disposal of cases. These tribunals are set up in Bombay, predominantly in Delhi. There are one or two in Bombay. And for a person who is in Madurai and who might ordinarily be able to go to the court in Madurai to resolve the dispute, will now have to look at the costs and the inaccessibility that having to go to a tribunal in Delhi brings. So that is one aspect of, another aspect of the problems that they face. We have encountered deaths. I'm not saying this is a dispute resolution process, but what I'm saying is that this is an outcome. We had a recent killing of 4 persons who were accused of rape and a gruesome murder in Telangana. And how did, I'm sure a lot of you had discussions with your friends and family on, was this the right way to do it? But, on the other hand, if it were to go to court, how long is this going to take? The problem of delay and pendency is sort of muddling how we look at what needs to be done, and the rule of law that we heard Dr. Madhav Khosla speak of. What is it doing to our perceptions of rule of law? A lot of, cases just hang on interim orders. People continue with their lives on the basis of interim orders that are passed. There was a study done by, researchers and published by CIP, which talks of patent cases pending in 4 of the chartered high courts, Delhi, Bombay, Madras and Kolkata between 2005 and 2015. I think some of you may have read it. There were 143 patent infringement suits filed during this period. And there were only 5 cases in which final judgments were given. So, one could go on and on about this. We learn more. So these are the problems. What have the responses been? The responses have been for instance, in the enactment of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, where the code has limited the judicial role of the tribunal, the National Company Law Tribunal and the Appellate Tribunal, and it has placed the responsibility of insolvency resolution in the hands of secured financial creditors. So this is one group of creditors who have a semi sort of determinative powers over what will happen to this company, what will be, the takeaway for other categories of creditors like workmen, like vendors. So this is one way, and it has set a time limit of day 1 of filing to 330 days, in which other verticals that Professor Shiju spoke about yesterday, like the competition, aspect of any resolution plan, all being completed within this period. It has limited your ability to appeal to courts, the high courts. You appeal to the National Company Law Tribunal and then to the Supreme Court on substantive questions of law. So this is another kind of response that we've had. We've had tribunalizations. You have tribunals being set up. You have every other law that comes which says, okay, we will set up the special court only for these category of cases. They will finish the cases in a year's time. The most recent being the Specific Relief Act, the amendments to the Specific Relief Act, which says, please set up infrastructure courts and these courts will decide the case within 1 year's time. You have, under the Specific Relief Act, a lot of decision-making left to the parties, a lot of determination left to the parties. And one example is in the provision that allows a person who says my contract is breached to issue a notice, terminate the contract, and to pass on that responsibility to some other agent to carry out the obligations in the contract. Now, traditionally, this was a decision, whether a breach occurred or did not occur in a contract. This was a decision that was taken by the court, but now the court is now sort of handing it back. So there is a variety of responses. We look at these responses. The next is diversity in dispute resolution, which I sort of referred to earlier. You have non-state justice systems that are in play. You have, for instance, in matrimonial disputes, women who cannot sort of afford to wait for the time it takes for family courts to decide the dispute, reaching out to through social, familial, extended family support to try and resolve this and work out a resolution with the counterparty themselves. You have religious leaders, religious scholars who are helping people resolve this. You have mediation, which is being introduced in several legislations. The Farmers Acts, the 2 acts that were recently passed by the Parliament, both provide for conciliation boards. They provide for conciliation as the first sort of port of call to resolve the disputes. They mandate that you have to go to conciliation, and they say each party will, at the time of getting into an agreement, set up a conciliation board which will help them resolve the dispute. So this is, one way of resolving disputes. You have under the MSME Act, you have a special design for dispute resolution, where if money is owed to micro, small or medium enterprises, these disputes will go to facilitation councils that are set up, who will conciliate on the dispute. And if parties are not able to resolve the disputes through conciliation, will then take up the disputes through arbitration and give a decision. So these are, several sort of ways of resolving disputes that are available to us in the context of the COVID pandemic. One part of dispute resolution that has gained a lot of momentum is online dispute resolution. Courts are hearing online. There are also efforts being made to sort of bring in artificial intelligence into limited categories of cases, narrow categories of cases, where through the use of artificial intelligence, it is, the endeavor is that we will dispose of cases faster. The last is aspirations. going back again to Dr. Khosla's talk over the last few days, what is it that we aspire for in dispute resolution? What are the values that are important to us? Is access important to us? Are human rights important to us? Is expediency important to us? Is collaboration important to us? Are advanced dispute systems that Anand spoke about, are these important to us? What is it that we want if we were designing a dispute system to see in this? And where is the balancing that takes place? So as a part of the track, we will be looking at constitutional public law, and in a minute, Mahesh will take you through what we hope to do in this. We will look at, so what is proposed is as a foundational, where we will have experts and practitioners talking to you about different sectors and disputes in these sectors. We will also be looking at international law, public law and private international law, because these, we believe, are foundations you must have whatever area of dispute resolution you do. If you wish to sort of practice in a district court, these principles still matter to how you decide or how you put forth your case for your client. When I say intersections between private and public international law, there are certain categories of disputes where elements of public law and private law have sort of been merged. We'll take the Vodafone arbitral award, for instance, now. This arises from a treaty that sought to protect investments made by private parties in countries, and it set obligations on the governments or the state to ensure that the investments were protected on certain standards that were set. And these standards were set in regional agreements and in bilateral investment treaty agreements. There is an international institution set up by the World Bank through this treaty, which resolves these disputes through a private mechanism of arbitration and conciliation. Now, this is a dispute against the state, and the state at the very minimum is balancing several interests. Now, do you take this to a private dispute institution, where what happens in the dispute, what is put forth, what is decided is private? Is this appropriate? These are questions we will be asking and sort of trying to answer. The Vodafone judgment, I think you would all, I think all of you will sort of respond to it or, relate to it from the aspect of retrospectivity that we were talking, we heard about a little while ago. But let me give you another example of a case where the government had agreed to give bauxite to a joint venture from the United Arab Emirates, a sovereign fund which had a joint venture with a company in India. And they were to set up an aluminium refinery. And bauxite was to be given by a state agency to them. Now the problem was, and all these agreements were in place, the problem was the bauxite was to be mined from a reserved forest. And there were objections to this. And finally, the state government refused to, give the approval for mining bauxite from there, and the state agency also cancelled the contract. But this is before an international tribunal. What are the public interests here? Is it just a matter of the government and this party? Is it a matter that is appropriate for arbitration? How are public interests of forest rights? Rights of people surrounding in the forests, our right to the environment, how are these aspects to be reflected in decision making here? So this is the intersection. These are sort of the areas we look at. And the next point I alluded to earlier, we will be looking at different types of litigations in court. Insolvency is a category of dispute resolution where from a single default, one person, the company or the individual not repaying a debt, which gets converted into a collective proceeding, which sort of even asks questions about the the solvency of the company or the person, and a takeover of the company by an agent appointed by the tribunal, and a series of processes where it is, the financial creditors who take decisions on what happens here. So, as a collective proceeding, how does this dispute resolution process work? It will be interesting. It will be of interest to you to know that, in the short life of 4 years that this law has been enforced, there have been 5 amendments, 6 if you take, a removal of difficulties order in the law. So these are the point I'm trying to make here is these are difficult, very, very difficult sort of policy decisions that are made on how we address existing problems in the disputes resolution systems that we have in our country. We will also look at innovations in dispute resolution, online dispute resolution being one. We will be looking at procedural laws in each of these categories. We look at laws and the changes to the laws of evidence. We will look at remedies. Can I ask Mahesh to step in now and talk about the Constitution Public Law course?
Sure, yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm not going to pretend that we are ready with the full course outline yet, but that's really work in progress. But I'll tell you what is our basic thinking in that will inform these 2 courses. There are 2 of them, of course. There's Constitution, or there's Public Law, and then there's a separate course on remedies. But they're not watertight compartments. They're really going to interact a lot with each other. And again, the way we've organized it is pretty much, again, there are 2 central ideas or 2 central outcomes that we want. One of them is, of course, that you should know the substantive law about some things, probably some things that you did not learn in your undergraduate studies. And if you plan to be litigating lawyers, you need to know what are the different kind of remedies. That's writ and non-writ remedies. Writ meaning your 32, 226 and 227. And your non-writ, that's what your civil courts and the tribunals would give, which is largely governed by the Specific Relief Act and your civil procedure and the framework that comes with it. So that's one part of the course. The second one, which is public law, the second one, which is more about reflecting and thinking about where we are headed, right? So that's the, strictly speaking, that's not just a direct skills training kind of a thing. That's thinking a bit deeper about how these systems are functioning these days and where we are headed as a result of it. So we will think about organization of all these new tribunals that are coming up, the laws around what tribunals should be from Chandrakumar, and from there on we've been having so many case laws, and every time a new tribunal is formed, we've invariably seen it challenged in court, and there's some new set of judgments that come out of it, some new principles that's coming out of it. And there's this, it's a tussle of sorts, I call it, between the parliament and the judiciary, but it's a much more silent one. It has been going on for years, and I don't see any end in sight anytime now. So we'll think about that, and importantly, what are the procedures that these tribunals are following? We all know that all of them have a procedure that's different from what is expected of a civil court. It's something simpler, but what is the impact of that? I mean, are we compromising some essential element in a fair dispute settlement process when we compromise on procedures? And then we also see a lot of quasi-judicial authorities that are being set up. I mean, again, as a child rights person, I have to mention something called the Child Welfare Committee that takes decisions on custody of children, on adoptions, but there isn't, the law doesn't mandate that even a single law-trained person must be there on that body. So this here is a body that's taking decisions about someone's rights, but not a single person who is trained in the law on that. And we find more examples of these kind of bodies or power centers that are coming up. And how does that augment well for a fair system which is based on law, based on the rule of law? So these are things that we will reflect on a little bit. And then in the public law course, we'll also look at some larger questions, apart from all the bits about what petition to file where and what's the strategy that you follow to get certain kind of orders. We'll also think about some larger questions that's floating around, and we'll that I think will remain on the table in the coming years. That's federalism, the broad idea of separation of powers, about the limits of fundamental rights, in fact. When you think about free speech versus controlling hate speech, or national security versus individual freedom, parliamentary privileges, the role of the speaker, and judicial review of that. I mean, if he certifies that this is a money bill, is that at the end of the matter? Because these are the major questions that's probably going to come up. And then also think about strategy, right? Think about, we'll talk to people who've been doing a lot of public law cases over the years, and how do they deal with the courts and the media. And in fact, let's face it, writing in the media or using popular media is now very much a part of building a public law case. Trying to get judicial opinion and public opinion in favor is very much a part of it, and it's practiced very systematically in many countries. So it's happening in India too, so we'll reflect a bit on what is going on here. We'll also think a bit about things like conflict of interest. We'll think about how lawyers as an institution have performed or not performed, or failed, how the bar has or has not been discharging what it's supposed to do. So those are the reflective bits of the course. Of course, you will learn a lot of law, we'll learn a lot of this, learn a lot of black letter law in that process, but we'll also think a little bit beyond that. So it's going to be a combination of picking up some skills, at the same time kind of thinking about where we are headed and what we need to do to reach the right spot. Yeah.
Thanks, Mahesh. So last bit that I wanted to sort of talk about was autonomous dispute resolution systems. One being arbitration, and the second being mediation and conciliation. In arbitration, the law gives a lot of play to you to appoint your own judge. In fact, now you find websites that allow people to sort of, just anyone, moonlight as an arbitrator. And, you have online dispute systems where you can select from ABCD, XYZ, someone who's a florist, I mean, I don't mean to, I don't mean this in a pejorative sense at all, but I just mean how much freedom one is given to sort of decide how one's dispute will be resolved. So you look at, this panel of arbitrators, you choose someone, you look at a florist because you think that this man might be a little more sensitive about what you have to say and claims you have, and you you appoint this person as the judge in your dispute. That's what arbitration allows for. It allows for a lot of processful freedom and wiggle room. You can set a time within which things can be done. You can set evidentiary sort of standards on which decisions will be taken. You might agree that you will not have oral evidence, you would only have documentary evidence. So there is a lot of autonomy on how you will resolve this dispute. And once there is an arbitral award given, there is a limited scope for challenge or setting aside of that award. When you come to mediation and conciliation, it is the parties who decide how the dispute will be resolved. They take a decision on, okay, this is what we think will be the resolution or the outcome of our problems or our conflict. This is a growing field in India. This spaces a lot of, it empowers parties enormously. It's being used in a lot of regulations as a substitute or as a way of sort of dealing with pendency in cases. We look at how problematic that is. We'll also understand what these processes are, what they mean. And I'm taking these two dispute resolution processes as a category because these are recognized and these are enforced. The outcomes in these dispute processes are recognized and enforced by the formal system. So there is sort of a connectivity there and credibility to these systems as a consequence. So this is what we will do. We also hope to have a couple of boot camps, one on online dispute resolution and something that towards the end of the program, look at research proposals that you would work on based on what it is that you think you want to do at the end of this course. So we bring some element of that into this, as well as looking at designing a dispute system by, looking at what values we have, what the problems we need to deal with, etc. So this is something we hope to do at the end of the course in smaller groups, apart from the research question. So this is the disputes track.